This week's subject is leaders' accountability to God, or also delegated authority. I kind of have as a subnote under that. We're going to start off with a scripture reading from Numbers 20, verse 2 through 13. I'll give you a moment to get there. Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt and to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. And the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the staff and assemble the people, and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them and give drink to the congregation and their cattle." And Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" And Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly. And the congregation drank, and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe me, to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and through them he showed himself holy." So we see here a failure of delegated leadership through Moses. He had the authority that was granted him to lead the people of Israel, but he was to do so within the will of the Lord. Here he's thinking of himself and his own pride, and instead of talking to a rock, decides to strike it and do what he thinks sounds like a better idea than what God told him to do. So from this, I think we need to consider, as leaders, is the way we think pragmatic? Are we doing what we think is going to get the best result all the time? Or are we following where the Lord commands us and tells us to go? Are we working from our own authority in our leadership, or are we working from God's authority that has been delegated to us? We need to keep that mindful. So with unpacking that a little bit, what is delegated authority? We kind of touched on that a little bit in my opening, but didn't really define it. Well, authority is the right to rule. All authority is God's because he created everything. So any rightful lesser authority on earth is a delegated authority. This means fathers in their homes, mothers with their children, governments, church leadership, and even bosses and managers in the workplace. Some level of delegated authority. And each of those kind of has lanes that they've been delegated within. When we exercise this delegated authority, we need to be sure that we're staying in the bounds that we've been given, and that we are being obedient to God in how we express that authority. I'm going to turn now to Colossians 3:18 through 4:1. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with much sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive your inheritance as a reward. You are serving the Lord Christ, for the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. Masters, treat your bondservants justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Here we see instructions, and I think a lot of times we focus on the side of submitting, but in each of these we also see the instructions to the authority that's granted here. So while we see wives submit to your husbands, we see the corresponding husbands love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Right? We're giving instruction as to how to exercise that authority. When children are told to obey their parents, we then turn around and see the instruction, the fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. Right? Same with bondservants, obeying in everything their earthly masters and working unto the Lord. But then we're turned around and told, masters, treat your bondservants fairly, knowing that you have a master in heaven. So we see these leadership principles of these guidelines and our responsibility to those that we lead, no matter what our level of authority is, whether that's in the home, outside of the home, as I think we don't currently have a bondservant-master relationship that relates well to kind of the employer-employee relationship. That's probably the closest we have in our current society. So we can see there that we're to treat our employees fairly and in a way that honors the Lord. I think we also see in James 3:1, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouth of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also is the tongue a small member, yet it boasts of great things. While this is speaking directly to church leadership, I think this has some application that can be applied to leadership as a whole. We see the principle of the leaders being held to a higher standard because they're responsible for who they're directing. And I think we see this principle with the rudder, and this is something that I know I've seen easily ignored with leadership, especially in the workplace, where leaders don't understand kind of the amount of influence small things they do has over their employees. Most notably, I've seen it visible where an offhanded comment will be made that people take as direction because the leader doesn't realize that they're not among peers, right? So when you have a position of authority, you have to be guarded with your tongue, because what you say carries with it a level of authority that the people under you should take as direction. If they're being faithful in trying to understand what their leadership that they've been placed under is trying to direct them, they're always looking for those cues and those signs. So we have to be careful, and we have to make sure that those cues and signs that we give are not only intentional as leaders, but also reflect our ultimate leader and authority, where we get our authority of the Lord, right? We need to make sure that we're not grumbling and making offhanded comments, because with a leadership position that has more strength, I think of this both in my work and at home with my children. I see that really strongly. If I have a grumbling spirit in either of those places, the impact that it has is much larger than just my own attitude and kind of what I can accomplish. Because I'm in a leadership position in both of those places. At work, if I have a grumbling spirit, that affects my entire team. Because if the boss is grumbling or unhappy about something, or doesn't think you should do something, or you're going to do it with a bad attitude, the whole team will pick up that attitude and run with it. That'll happen with your children too. If you're, okay, well, I'm going to clean the house, or I'm going to vacuum, but I'm gonna be grumpy about it while I do it because I really don't want to. Your children, your wife, they'll pick up that from you as a leader, and that attitude will be expressed. So with that positional authority that you've been granted comes this responsibility to lead well. And I think another important piece of this we see in Philippians, wrong way. There's one of my marks. I apparently lost one of my page marks. There it is. In Philippians 2, 3 through 4. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only into his own interest, but also into the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. This, I think, really speaks to the attitude and the motivations we're supposed to have, especially in leadership positions. I think it's really common especially in the workplace, where people want to be in a leadership position and it's for them, right? Because they want to be in charge, they want the more money, they want the respect that they get by moving into a leadership position. And I've seen that commonly, but that's not what I see among the people that have been the people I would consider good leaders that I've worked with. The people that I've seen that I would count as good leaders that I've worked with see leadership as something that's necessary for the organization or whatever group you're with to achieve what they want to do. But they see their responsibility to the people they lead, but they don't see it as necessarily a more important position. They see it as just another necessary position, right? So you can't have all leaders, right? If you have an entire team full of managers, you're going to not have anything to manage, right? Like you need people doing the work, and the people doing the work isn't any less important than the person managing them. While there might be a position of authority there, and it might carry some respect with it, you shouldn't think of yourself in that way. You should think of yourself in all humbleness and serving your team members while leading them, right? That doesn't mean necessarily doing the lowest job on the totem pole all the time. Now, you should be willing to do any job that you ask any of your people to do, right? And I think this also applies in the home pretty easily. We don't ask our kids to do chores that we're not willing to do, and usually we've done them when our children were younger. And we're willing to chip in and do the job, but that's not necessarily, as a leader, the way you can best serve the people you're leading. Because that leadership is needed, you can serve them best by being a leader. I think this is one of the places where kind of the servant leadership push that happened recently kind of overshot a little bit and overcorrected. They had the attitude right, but didn't always identify that you are serving by leading well. They wanted to push it back almost too much into doing kind of the more menial tasks and lowering yourself versus having that humble attitude while leading. Then next. Then I think another important principle to note and about this higher level of accountability that's responsible from leaders. We see directly from Jesus in Luke 48, where we see everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. We see this principle of, as you're granted authority, more responsibility comes with that. I think a lot of examples that we see, especially in the scriptures, deal with the leadership in the church, obviously. But we see this in the parables that the Lord taught with, like the parable of the talents, right? Like as these men are given, they're expected to return on that. So the same with the authority. So the more you're given authority over, the more you're expected to do with that authority that you've been granted. And when we remember that all authority is granted by God, that speaks to what we need to return, right? When we're talking about workplace authority, when you're given people that you're leading, you are responsible not only to your employer, which you are, for the authority that they grant you over team members and to have a positive return, but ultimately that authority was granted by God. So you're responsible not only to lead them well and within proper ethics, but where possible to shepherd them and show them the Lord, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, right? I think back to I really like from the Catechism, what is the chief end of man? It's to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So in everything that we do, we should be doing that and pointing others to it, because we want to encourage and give others the ability to fulfill their chief end as God made us. I think one other thing that I didn't really touch on in the lesson I was getting to, but leadership isn't just positional, right? I think in business and in workplaces and even in any organization, there's some level of positional authority that people have, right? The elders of the church carry authority because they're the elders in the church, but they're expected and hopefully leading in a way that makes people want to follow and submit to their authority. The same goes with good leaders in the workplace. The good leaders that I've worked for, I would have listened to them whether they were my boss or not, right? Like if they were a coworker and they made a suggestion, I would have agreed and followed what they were saying because they were good leaders, not because they were given the position of authority. Now, we should respect them because of that position of authority and give deference to that as subjects of that authority. But when you're in that position of authority, I think the weakest form of leadership is leadership by position, right? Like if you're calling on, well, because I'm the boss, that's why you're going to do this. That usually doesn't go very well. You'll get some results out of people for a short period of time, right? Like they'll come in and do that job, but they're not going to take your intent and your overall direction leadership, which is really what you want when you're leading a group of people. You want to, you're going to be delegating on specific tasks, whether it's around the home. Hey, take out the trash right now. Hey, pick up your room. Things like that. Whether it's at work. Hey, I need you to work on this task now. But ultimately, in those, you're trying to point to the direction you want to lead that. So you want, when you're telling your son, hey, take out the trash. You see, it's full. You want to eventually impress on them, hey, when I see the trash is full, I know I'm supposed to take it out, right? Not wait for dad to tell me that the trash is full and I need to take it out. But if you're leading from just a positional authority, they'll wait for you to tell them every time. If you're leading through humbleness and with responsibility, and they see that you're taking responsibility for them and have what's best for them at heart, I think that's another important piece of leadership, is that your team or your group that you're leading, your family, knows that the reason you're leading them the way you are is because you're looking out for what you see as what's best for them. When they see that, they'll start to understand the direction of where you want it to go, and they'll start to act accordingly with that. And follow that and carry it out on their own. Back to the trash, right? Like they understand that, hey, when the trash is full, that's not good because then people can't throw things away and we can't keep things cleaned up, and then the counter gets a mess and it just cascades out of control, right? So I see the trash is full. In order to keep things running smoothly, I know I should just go ahead and take that out. And that's kind of that training that comes with leadership. Anyone have any thoughts, questions, examples? We'll start with anything particular to leadership, and then we can kind of move out from there to work as a whole. As again, since this is our last class and last opportunity to discuss anything that stuck out to you through the entire.
I think your last point is really good. Whether it be at home, there is, you think about the way that we train our children. There is a stage of life which you're depending upon strictly positional leadership.
Mm-hmm.
When the children are really young, because I'm the dad, that's why.
Yeah.
Is a common response, right? But if you're still with your teenagers, because I'm the dad, that's why, and that's all you've ever given your kids, you'll lose them along the way, because that is the weakest form of leadership, right? If your knowledge and your example is what your kids are seeing as they get older, the character, your integrity, those are the aspects of leadership that carry on in the future are much stronger. When the kid leaves the home, hopefully, if you've left them with that company because they respect leadership that's built on that, not an authoritarian sort of positional leadership. So I think that last point, that it really, servant leadership, I think your point is well taken. When that came up, that's mostly what that originated from. They did sort of carry the ball too far. The origination of that is you be there as a knowledge source looking out for the welfare of your employees, and they're going to respond to that, right?
Yeah.
In the right way. So,
Yeah, I think it came from a great place, right? Like,
it better need at the time.
yes, yeah.
I'd like to add something,
Yeah.
Because there are 4 teams in here. So I think it's to your last point. I don't know this. I don't know if any of you are in a position of leadership, but most likely not. You don't have a position of leadership. But I think it's so important to remember, like Paul said with Timothy, like, let no man despise your youth, but be an example in your word and in your conduct. And so, like, age really doesn't, there is no, age limit to this and to being a leader. You always have people that look up to you in some way. You always have friends or siblings that are learning from your example, peers. And so I think it's really important that we realize, that wherever God has placed you, in your home or in your school, and, it's good for all of us to remember this. It doesn't take a special extrovert to be a leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like anyone can be a leader in how they behave and how they speak, no matter who they come in contact with. And it's always important to remember that there are people looking up to you. And so how you act is important, even if it doesn't feel like it,
Yeah, and you reminded me of something that I think is a big one, and it can apply to teens also. There's this concept called leading up, which is kind of the opposite of positional authority, because you're really relating to your superior. But a lot of it has to do with how you frame information and help them understand kind of your level and perspective. And also, and that can speak to other people kind of at that same level, and the way you see a problem and potential solutions, right? Because sometimes the person with the positional authority to make a decision doesn't have one piece of needed perspective. Right? So you can lead up by helping share that perspective, and you have to do so in a way that you're not like, hey, you don't see this, right? Like, it's very much a, hey, here's what I see from where I'm at. Here's some information. Take it and run with it as you can. But that's a form of leadership also.
But I think, too, what everyone was just saying about the youth side of it, I've always thought everybody is leading somebody. You may not know it, but somebody's watching you somewhere. Whether you're a teen, big brother, big sister, everybody somewhere has some influence over others and their opinions, their thoughts. The question really becomes then, if you're a believer, where are you leading them? Well, what does your example speak? And the other thing that's important, I think, especially for our young people to understand when we talk about the position of leadership, and I think Emma, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Emma was touching on this, is you don't need positional leadership. It's the weakest form of leadership. You don't need a title to lead. When you think about what Paul told Timothy in that passage, Paul said, let no man despise your youth, be an example.
Mm-hmm.
You be an example, you're going to be a leader. So people older and younger than you,
Mm-hmm.
just go be an example.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking on that, most of the people that I've seen successfully get promoted in a workplace to a position of leadership that do well were promoted to that position because they were leading their peers, right? I've seen other people get promoted to their I'm trying to remember the phrase, to their highest level of incompetence. That's what it is. Promoted to the highest level of incompetence, right? You're good at this, so I'm going to put you in charge of it. And we're going to keep doing that until you can't do your job that you get promoted to. That's one trap that gets fallen into, right? I see that in my work where sometimes, hey, this person was a really good software engineer, so I'm going to make him a manager of software engineers. That's usually not the best approach. You look for the guy who's leading his peers and taking, like, hey guys, let's get together and do this. Let's get this accomplished. Those types of things. You look for those people, and those are the people that do well when promoted.
Some knucklehead decided to call that the Peter principle.
Yeah.
Don't know why. That's good stuff, Greg. Thanks. Greg made a good point. We've got a few minutes left. I think let's use that if you have any questions on any topic that we covered over the last 13 weeks, 12 weeks of material in this class, or some situation, or, what do you think? Was this helpful? I'm not looking for, praise here, but was this helpful? Is it useful to you? Are there areas that we can answer additional questions that relative to work in general?
The times that I was here, I found it really practical and helpful, so I appreciate that, the practicality of it, like how we can apply it in our just everyday, mundane lives. So.
I think, my hope would have been, in line with what Emma was just saying, that we were able to try and take the practical and mundane and help you view it through a lens and see it as being under the lordship of Christ, under, as men, I'll make a generalization, but as men, we tend to, maybe women too, but men in particular tend to compartmentalize our lives, right? Someone once described a man's brain as having all these little boxes of it. There's a box for all of these different issues of life. And we do tend to approach things that way. And unfortunately, it's an errant way of viewing our life. Everything is underneath the lordship of Christ, and we need to view our work and our engagement and everything that we do as being through that lens, subject to God, and any responsibility or gain that we have from work is secondary to honoring and glorifying God in everything that we do, right? So hopefully we've helped some with that, not just with vocational work, but the way that we engage any other activity that could be called work.
Yeah, I think to me one of the important points of that, and one of the things that kind of has shaped my attitude towards work really over the last few years, has been that seeing the mundane building of life, right? Like just, you go to work every day, without the lordship of God over that is just kind of crushing and boring and mundane, right? Like you're always going to be looking for escape. You looking for the next show to watch tonight, or a video game to play, or something to do to escape kind of the mundane boringness of it. But when you see your work and all of these steps as building the kingdom for God, and really living out what we're supposed to be, it puts more significance to that, and then you see it more as like these faithful steps that I'm taking towards this bigger picture, right? I think this is one of the things that we wanted to touch on here, was that God's kingdom isn't advanced just by the church and professional ministry. Your secular work is also God's work. You're raising your family, right? I think we've done a good job in the church lately of pointing out how, right, that's your first place of discipleship, right? If you have children, as you're raising the children, that's your number one mission field. So you're building the kingdom there. But when you're in the office doing whatever work you're doing, you're building the kingdom there too, both through your influence on individuals that you interact with, but also just on faithfully carrying out the work put before you.
Anybody else? Thoughts, comments, questions? Challenges? Anything you want to challenge that we said? Welcome that too.
Cool. Okay, well, if that's it.
We were either very thorough or we put them to sleep.
Either way. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer. Thank you all for being part of this class. I've enjoyed working through these lessons and preparing them. So, dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you again for this time you gave us together. Thank you for this class that you've given us over this quarter, for the lessons that we've had and anything that we've been able to take away and apply. Lord, I know that anytime we speak your word, it doesn't return void. So even if our own words and teachings got in the way, Lord, I know that we opened your word and shared that. So that gives me confidence that there was some positive return that was made through our teaching. Lord, we thank you for that assurance. Thank you for the people in this class, and Lord, maybe go forward with good attitudes towards work and what you've put before us. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen.